Yo, guys, tomato sauce in here. Good morning, good morning. Today, I want to go over another ultimate Blood Death Knight tanking guide. This time, we're focusing on higher keys. As we get into 20 plus keys, my build from the last guide ends up changing a little bit. So if you guys have watched the last Blood Death Knight guide I put out, it was a ton of fun. It was very well received. I, unlocked Keystone Hero with that guide. I was cracking in DK terms, right? Blood DK terms, doing a ton of damage in every key, not really having any survivability issues. But as I broke into, like the 19, 20 key range, I did notice that there was one key talent that I was missing. And I wanted to restructure my build with a more defensive mindset and finally get to play around with Umbilicus Eternus, which I, have actually thought was a pretty cool talent since day one, but I went with like a more aggressive build. So here is the more defensive build for high keys. We'll go through all of our talents here. Now, if you watched my last guide, you'll notice that my class tree is pretty much the same. I'm really not changing anything except I take AMZ as kind of a lock here because I think it's really good to have an additional cooldown to help your teammates through, difficult parts of the dungeon, right? So anti-magic zone, it's on a 2-minute cooldown and it's some great utility. Now, I was kind of cycling it on and off in my last build. I would throw that talent point in different places. Maybe I would take the leech, maybe I would take permafrost, but with this build and now grabbing rune tap, you actually have a lot more flexibility, with your Blood Death Knight as far as survivability goes for yourself. So you really want to take anti-magic zone for your teammates. So if you're familiar with my class tree from the last video, we really don't have to go too far into it. But, once again, we are taking A-Bomb Limb and Empower Rune Weapon. Will of the Necropolis is a staple of this side of the tree. We forego Wraithwalk, which I just think it's in a bad place, unfortunately, to throw away a couple talent points to get there. So we take Death's Echo, so we have 2 charges of Death's Advance, but more importantly, 2 charges of Death and Decay, which is always absolutely buffing our damage. Unholy Ground, we're gaining haste for standing within our Death and Decay, and it's slowing all of the enemies around us. So if you play Blood Death Knight at all this season, you know how important it is to have our Death and Decay to kind of open up a little bit if you are taking a little extra damage, right? I also go into Unholy Endurance for high keys because this extra wall is absolutely huge. So just an additional 15% wall. Add that to the list of, millions and millions of Blood DK cooldowns that you have in your back pocket. You have AMS, AMZ, you have Icebound Fortitude, you have your wall with Lichborn, and you are a death striking machine. You're always doing more healing than your healers and keys. Money back guarantee. It is the strongest healing class in the game, Blood Death Knight. So let's look at how we've changed the class tree for high keys, 20 plus keys. Essentially what we've done here is I've peeled back from my favorite ability, Blood Tap, which is a lot less required with the current 4-piece that we have with Blood Death Knight. I don't feel like we're as rune starved as we were in the beginning of the season. So this has allowed us to get a little bit more defensive oriented, right? So now we're taking Rune Tap, which honestly, I really think the only reason I didn't need to take this ability up to 18s was simply because the Blood Death Knight healing is so out of control. It's so good. And if you have a fast reaction time, I played a lot of Counter-Strike in the past, you can, time your death strikes exactly when the damage is going out by watching mob animations and just kind of getting a feel for the dungeons. But Rune Tap is really nice. This ability alone kind of makes you immortal on your Blood Death Knight. I can't really say enough about it in high keys. It's I'll go back and I'll say from my first video, I will fix something. I do believe rune tap to be mandatory, but let's go down the tree and we'll go row by row and kind of take a look at each ability and how we change things up from the first guide. So you can see obviously Heart Strike, Morrowind, Blood Boil, Vampiric Blood, amazing cooldown, just another defensive that we have on Blood Death Knight added to the list. Crimson Scourge, your auto attacks on targets infected with your Blood Plague have a chance to make your next Death and Decay cost no runes and reset its cooldown. This is, you know, a staple of Blood Death Knight gameplay. We take into our fourth row, Death's Caress, which is great for starting pulls or pulling, you know, like a one-off mob from on the side of the screen. On top of that, though, what's really big with Death's Caress that a lot of people overlook is that you actually generate 2 Bone Shield charges with this. So you Death's Caress on the way into the pull, and you can Morrowind, and you're already at 5 stacks of Bone Shield, ready to, you know, blast a Shattering Bone. What do you call it? Tombstone out at everybody. Yeah, so it's pretty nice. It's pretty nice. It's an overlooked ability, the fact that you actually generate 2 Bone Shield charges from Death's Caress. Now I go into improved Vampiric Blood because, again, we are absolutely trying to be as defensive as we possibly can, trying to make our healers' lives much easier than my first build. And, you know, we're getting into higher keys now, so we just want more defensives as it is. From there, we go to Ossuary. While you have at least 5 Bone Shield charges, the cost of Death Strike is reduced by 5 runic power. Additionally, your max runic power is increased by 10. This is a very big early talent. You 100% always take this. And you could see, right? I'm not taking as much Heart Strike damage as I did in the first build. I'm not as Heart Strike focused. We still press that build or press that button as our main filler ability. But we're not as focused on Heart Strike in this version of the build. Again, we go into Rune Tap. Every time you press this button, you reduce all damage taken by 20% for 4 seconds. Huge for high keys on Blood DK. You'll never die with this, but just in case you find yourself in a bad spot, we do end up taking Purg in this build as well. Now we go to Foul Bulwark. Each charge of your Bone Shield increases your maximum health by 1%. Dancing Rune Weapon summons a rune weapon for 8 seconds that mirrors your melee attacks and bolsters your defensives. You're gaining 40% parry when Dancing Rune Weapon is up, and you have so much CDR built into this ability that it'll be up very often. We go into Relish in Blood, and when Crimson Scourge is active, if you remember, that's over here, your next Death and Decay heals you for an attack power value per Bone Shield charge, and you immediately gain 10 runic power. So you try to keep your Bone Shield charges pretty high whenever you're going to drop a Crimson Scourge buffed Death and Decay. Rapid Decomposition. Your Blood Plague and Death and Decay deal damage 18% more often. Additionally, your Blood Plague leeches 50% more health. Just some great passive healing. You'll see this on your meters. I took it in the last build because we were very HPS focused. Just a very, very awesome balance. Satiable Blade. Here's that CDR we were talking about. Dancing Rune Weapon generates 5 Bone Shield charges. When a Bone Shield charge is consumed, the cooldown of Dancing Rune Weapon is reduced by 5 seconds. This intertwines with Tombstone. If you remember my last video, again, when you pop your Tombstone, right, you want to make sure you have 5 or more Bone Shield charges, and Dancing Rune Weapon is on cooldown. So you're going to use Dancing Rune Weapon into your Tombstone ability and immediately get, 25 seconds of CDR on your Dancing Rune Weapon. And then every single time you pop a Bone Shield charge, you'll get that CDR reduced by 5 seconds. So cooldown reduction, essentially, on Dancing Rune Weapon. If you played Diablo, you're very familiar with that terminology. Now, Bone Shield increases your haste by 10%. We're already getting a 5% haste buff. We always have Bone Shield up. Now we're getting an additional 10% haste buff. So 15% haste built into the tree for the class that loves haste the most. You're never going to have an issue with runes with this build or my other build. because I do play with blood tap in lower keys. But let's keep our focus on the high keys, right? Reinforced bones increases armor gain from bone shield by 10%. So we're just getting more armor out of this. Everlasting bond summons one additional copy of dancing rune weapon and increases its duration by 8 seconds. All of your abilities are duplicated while you have dancing rune weapon up. So you'll notice, right? When you dancing rune weapon, you're going to immediately want to get your blood plague out via your blood boil. That's over here. This is an AoE blood plague application right when you're in the pack, and you'll see instead of 1 stack of the dot, you'll now get 2 stacks of the dot across all your targets, plus all your other abilities are doubled during your dancing rune weapon. This is an awesome ability. And again, you're getting more leech with that double blood plague. So you're very immortal during dancing rune weapon. Death Strike's healing is increased by 15%, and you're gaining 10% leech for 8 seconds. You'll have this up every single time you need it. So very, very nice. Enemies afflicted or affected by blood plague take 5% increased damage from you, and Death Strike increases the damage of your blood plague by 30% for 8 seconds, stacking up to 5 times. So you can see the synergy between blood plague, Death Strike, leech, all that good stuff happening. That's why you're getting so much healing out of your blood plague leech throughout the life of a key. Now we go to Sanguine Ground. We just deal 6% more damage and receive 5% more healing while standing in our Death and Decay. So not only are we gaining haste, but we're actually getting a healing buff for standing in our Death and Decay. Again, Tombstone, consume 5 bone shield charges. For each charge consumed, you gain runic power and absorb damage equal to 6% of your health. This will generally be one of your hardest hitting abilities throughout the dungeon because of this talent, Shattering Bone. When bone shield is consumed, it shatters, dealing an attack power value of shadow damage to nearby enemies. The damage is tripled when you are within your Death and Decay. So you're always going to want to have your Death and Decay up and be standing in it when you're doing your Empower Rune weapon, Shattering Bone, Tombstone goes throughout the key. And since it's only a 1-minute cooldown and you can get Dancing Rune weapon pretty damn close to a minute, these guys line up really well together. So it's a lot of fun. Now we go into Heartrend, where Heart Strike has a chance to increase the damage of your next Death Strike by 20%. So as you Heart Strike throughout the key, you'll be getting bigger Death Strikes. But we really take this talent to get into Purgatory, where an Unholy Pact that prevents fatal damage, instead absorbing incoming healing equal to the damage prevented, lasting 3 seconds. So what you need when Purgatory goes off is to be healed through it. When Purgatory does go off, it might proc once a dungeon for you, right? It really doesn't proc very often for me, maybe even less because I'm so used to playing without it. Definitely less. But it's a big get out of jail free card, and it enables you to gather some pretty big pulls that would have been scary on my build. So between Rune Tap and Purgatory, you can do some pretty crazy things and not feel like you're going to int the key, right? So as you get into those 20 keys trying to unlock your portals, Purgatory and Rune Tap become much nicer, especially as you're pugging, because you really want to just do the biggest favor for that healer out there. You don't want a healer to tilt and int the key. So it definitely helps to take Rune Tap and Purgatory as you're trying to unlock your portals on your Blood DK and do 20 plus keys. Let's go into Ironheart. Blood Shield's duration is increased by 2 seconds, and it absorbs 20% more damage. You're going to see Blood Shield on your healing meters as a very nice talent. Red Thirst reduces the cooldown on vampiric blood by 2 seconds per 10 runic power spent. So not only do we have cooldown reduction built into our dancing rune weapon through Insatiable Blade, but our vampiric blood and our improved vampiric blood get cooldown reduction built into them via Red Thirst. We 2 out of 2 this on the more defensive build. You're always going to have cooldowns up when you need them in this build, which is a really nice, it's the most important part of this build and what really differentiates my build from this build, right? My build is great for like 18 or lower keys. but this build will take you, comfortably into the 20 plus range. You could be doing 25s in this build and feel a lot safer than you would without some of these talents. And again, I didn't take Umbilicus Eternus in my more damage focused build. But I love this, right? It's actually a great ability. I used it in the very beginning of this expansion. But I noticed I didn't need the extra survivability at the time when I was unlocking Keystone Master. However, when you try to get into unlocking your portals, this is really nice. So let's go through it. After Vampiric Blood expires, which we have a ton of CDR built in, right? It's already a 1.5 minute cooldown. You can get it down to a minute, even less. After Vampiric Blood expires, you absorb damage equal to 5 times the damage your Blood Plague dealt during Vampiric Blood. So it's very good to combine or maybe not totally combine it, but you can rock Vampiric Blood and your, like, towards the end of Empower Rune Weapon, right? Refresh your Blood Plague so you have 2 copies of it going on all the mobs around you. And then you can chain that into Vampiric Blood since you have CDR built into Red Thirst. And now your Umbilicus Eternicus is going to do, the maximum amount of survivability healing or absorbing for you. And again, since we're so focused on absorbs as a blood DK between AMS and Blood Shield and all the other goodies, you're also taking this Gloom Ward talent, and your absorbs are 15% more effective on you. So Umbilicus Eternus actually ends up getting a 15% buff just from our class tree, as do all of our Blood Shield absorbs that we are making happen through our standard gameplay. So guys, I just wanted to go through this talent calculator. I know the other video has been absolutely huge for Blood Death Knight players. Got a lot of Keystone Masters playing that riskier build, but here's a more conservative option for people that, really, didn't like the idea of not taking Rune Tap or Purgatory as they progress throughout the season. So that's all I've got for you today, guys. Have a good day, have a good week, have a good month, and have a great year. Tomato sauce and out. Blood Death Knight survivability absolutely in for 10.0.7, and as we move into 10.1. Take it easy, guys. Have a good one.